What's up, everybody? This is Ty the Bourbon Guy, and this is episode 1 of Bourbon Talk. Finally made it. I'm excited. This is the first episode, the first official episode of Bourbon Talk. So we're going to get things started here in a few seconds. Apologize on the delay, a little technical difficulties, right? But we're going to work through it. We basically, we'll get to it here in a minute, but Bookers versus Bakers. You saw the headline. So we're going to see which of these two either are worth it or which one at least I prefer, and see if either, maybe both of them are worth it. But we're going to figure it out soon. But before I get that kicked off, I just wanted to, kind of touch base with everybody. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Labor Day, it can be, I don't know, any weekend really, holiday weekend. It could be a good weekend, but then, getting back to the grind is always, difficult, but we're going to make it through it. So everybody let me know, as people are still joining the stream, let me know how your weekend went. Did anybody do anything exciting? Shifty Trash Panda, love the IG page. I appreciate that, man. For anybody not following me on Instagram, it's at Ty the Bourbon Guy. You guys can follow me there. For those of you that may be following me on other platforms, but not on Instagram, that's actually where I got my start for social media within whiskey. Told the story in a previous stream, but my wife basically, when I started getting into whiskey and just having a few different bottles, she just encouraged me to just basically take pictures of the ones that I've had so that way I could remember what I had. But that ended up turning into an actual Instagram page, and it kind of blew up from there. So now I've got over 5,000 followers. So if you do follow me on there, I appreciate that. It's amazing to me to see this whiskey community, what it can do, and just how many people that I've met through there, and how many people that I've got a chance to connect with. There's actually a follower of mine, and I follow his page too, at Bourbon and Rye Club, and you guys can check him out on Instagram as well. And he's there's actually several pages that I follow that are down in New Orleans, but he's one that I've talked to a few times to see how they're doing, and I can only imagine what they're going through there, and trying to get back to New Orleans, just get everything back together. So he sent me a few links that I can definitely share with you all. I do share them on Instagram as well, that you could donate to. And a lot of restaurants down there are helping people that need food and all that stuff. So every dollar helps. It's one of those situations where people need you. And if I could spend, money on whiskey, I could definitely spend money to help somebody in that time of need. So I encourage you guys to do that. If you can. There's so many causes out there that are going towards New Orleans, right? So, whatever one maybe you have a connection with, but I encourage you to do that. Shifty Trash Panda, appreciate the positive vibes. It's always positive vibes, man. I appreciate everybody catching in on the stream, but I think it was maybe a week or two ago. There's actually an organization called Bourbon Women, and they held an event a few weeks ago, and I saw some of the videos and clips that came out of that, and it just looked like an amazing time. But it made me start thinking about, in general, just people that are getting into whiskey and that are so passionate about it and enthusiastic about it, just as much as I am. And a lot of people are way more into it than I am. So it just made me start thinking, I think for me, originally thinking about whiskey, it's like whether it's your grandfather's drink or, some of those things. And for me, seeing with the direction that whiskey's going is just amazing. And to see so many women, not just enthusiasts, there's women all over the industry that are doing amazing things. And that's really cool to see. And so I mean, there's, master distillers, there's tasters, there's just, I don't know. There's people that are running, women, females that are running these organizations too. And so from a business standpoint, and it's just amazing to see. And there's been a lot of success in whiskey, and I personally don't feel like that's a coincidence. There's been more diversity lately in whiskey, and then there's been more success. So, but also I've seen all different types of, whether it's different male, female, different orientations, different races. I've seen all types of people, excuse me, get into it, and it's just been really cool to see. So, along with that, though, this, the bourbon boom, I was kind of thinking about that too, and that's kind of what this, I guess, this time period is referenced as, is the bourbon boom. So, one of the things that makes me think about is, with how much I'm involved or what I do, I always hear people talk about, just back in the day, I could go to the liquor store and I could get whatever bottle and it was there. And I understand the frustration that you now go to a liquor store and it's harder to find a lot of whiskeys that used to be just sitting there. But a lot of the times, it's whiskey be, or we be booming. I thought I said whiskey be booming. We do be booming, but boom on. So it's basically one of those things that I feel like, yes, there's a lot of whiskey out there that's been really, that I've enjoyed over the years. And then I go into a store and there's one right now, it's Old Granddad 114. And at least in this area, I can't find it anywhere. And it's just, it's not an expensive bottle. I think typically I've seen it around $30, somewhere in that range, depending on the store. A lot of times a lot less than that. And I can't find that bottle anywhere. And so it's a lot of these bottles now are not necessarily rare or really expensive, but it just, in general, like it's almost like they catch momentum. I don't know if people post about them, talk about them, review them, and every single YouTube channel and social media person involved in whiskey has a top 5 bourbons and, this and that. And a lot of the times Old Granddad 114 is listed. So I'm guessing that people are going on YouTube and Instagram and seeing these bottles posted and going out and getting them. But which is great, but then it just eats it up and then it's all gone. So I was talking with my favorite liquor store that I go to all the time. The people that manage that store, they're just great, very knowledgeable. And I was just kind of talking to him about the fact that bottle goes, I mean, it's missing. It's not there. But yet there's other ones on the shelf that are just sitting there. And it's amazing to me that if people were really into it because this is rare or that, this or that, whatever, they would be going to other bottles and not these bottles. So for me, it's been interesting to follow the trends, but I understand the frustration of those bottles being out, but at the same point, I think that this has created just an overwhelming need for bourbon. And so the way I always think about it, just from a business standpoint, is if you have a product that people are trying to buy and can't buy it, then you're struggling. So you're trying to keep up. The thing with whiskey to remember is it's not an overnight type of product. So they have to age it a certain amount of time or, come up with a new idea for a product that, some of these bigger distilleries are sitting on a lot of whiskey, sure, but some of these other ones are not able to do that. And so for them to keep up with a trend, is what they're actually trying to do it, even though it doesn't seem like that. But it's actually promoted so many other brands. So, it's led to innovation. It's led to new brands coming along. One of my favorite new brands right now is New Riff. So for those of you that follow me on Instagram, I did a IG live with one of the founders of New Riff, and just an amazing story to hear how they decided to do that. And New Riff to me has always been a company that I felt did it right. There's a lot of starts and new whiskey companies out there, and a lot of them will unfortunately go through the whole marketing schemes and whatever it may be, trying to get your business. And I understand that from a business perspective, but as a consumer, I just think, I mean, there's too much information out there in general. For consumers now, especially in whiskey, are very knowledgeable. So you can YouTube things and Google and this and that, and you can figure out really quickly who's just kind of telling you one thing or who's not being authentic. So I think when a brand really taps into the authenticity of their brand and then basically taking that experience and bringing it to the consumer, at least in whiskey, I think that that's something that's it has shown those brands have done really well. So you have new brands like New Riff, and Bardstown Bourbon Company is another one that I can think of. And what Bardstown is doing is actually pretty amazing too. I think that they are experimenting so much with whiskey blending. So they're sourcing, meaning that they're bringing in whiskey from other places, but they're very, they just are very transparent, I guess. So they put it on the bottle where they're getting it from, what is the percentage in that barrel that they had or that batch. And so they're telling you where they got it from, that it's not theirs or that it is theirs or whatever it may be. But then they also are finishing whiskey. And so they're finishing their bourbon. And so what that means is they are taking different barrels that were used previously for something else. And a lot of the time you see it in bourbon with wine, different wines, they take the bourbon and they age it in a barrel. And then after it ages for however long they need it to age in that barrel, they'll basically put it into another barrel that was used previously for wine. And that's a wine finished bourbon or one of those types of products. So that has become its own thing. And there's a lot of right now controversy on, is that a bourbon? It is a bourbon when it goes into the barrel, but now you finish it with another, product, wine or whatever it may be. Is that still bourbon? And so, I don't know. There's a lot of controversy on that, but I just know that what's coming out of it, they're doing a great job, at least for them, and it tastes really good. For me personally, I don't see the issue with it. I understand the naming of it, but Scotch has been doing this now for a while. Same thing, and it's worked really well for Scotch. So there's just so many brands that are out there now that are just really doing their thing, and so I guess I would just encourage anybody, if you find one of those brands, there's a lot of times I see, I'll go into a liquor store and, maybe those brands have a rep there or somebody that's sampling the whiskey, and people will walk right by that and go up to the counter and ask, do you guys have Blanton's? No, they don't have Blanton's. And if they do have Blanton's, they're not going to sell it to you for just walking up to them like that. So, so skip that question altogether. But as you pass those tables, I just, I don't know, just reach out to those companies. And there was one person that I talked to one time, and I think they aged their bourbon for it was like less than a year or something. I mean, it was a quick turnaround. And so obviously it wasn't really that good. But I sat there and talked with the guy because to me, it's, they're making an effort to do these things to be present in the stores. So, just talking to them and trying to understand where they're coming from and why they're doing what they're doing. And I'm not saying every whiskey that you taste is going to be amazing from a local place or a smaller distillery or, but it's just like anything, just supporting local and those craft and smaller distilleries is important. So find ones you like, but then support them and do what you can to help them. So I got a few comments here. Mr. Solo Dolo, do you think that adds to the value of the bottle? I must have missed this one. So you must be talking about maybe just the hype behind it. Let me know if that's what you're saying. Are they reselling? There are a lot of people. So in the bourbon world, whiskey world, it's called the secondary market. So there's a lot of people that buy those bottles that do not plan on drinking them at all. Um, all they want to do is resell that, which is illegal. But that's what a lot of them plan to do. There's also a lot of counterfeit out there. So for anybody that's on social media, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be, if somebody offers you a bottle of something, don't buy it. There's so many people out there that are counterfeiting whiskey, and they'll buy those bottles. A lot of people actually go on eBay and buy an empty bottle and fill it with whatever, seal it back up, and then go on Facebook and say, "Hey, I've got this bottle, rare bottle of Pappy Van Winkle, 23 year, and I'll sell it to you." Yeah, just my advice. I mean, do what you want. My advice would be to stay away from all that. It's not worth that at all. That was a good IG live. Yeah, the one I did with New Riff was really good. And I really enjoyed having them on that show. So, but what I'm here for tonight is, at least for episode 1, I think going forward, we'll try to figure out some more guests. But we're lining them up now. But tonight, I figured we're going to take a look at these two. So this is Baker's 7-year, 107 proof, versus at least this batch of Booker's. So the thing to remember about these two, so even though I'm kind of doing them head to head, this bottle is actually a single barrel. So that means that this came from one specific barrel. And the cool thing about these products is it actually, I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but it actually has, there it is, a barrel number, and tells you on there where it came from. And with Baker specifically, you can actually go online and type that barrel number in, and it'll tell you basically where your whiskey, the journey it was on. It's a really cool thing, how it got to wherever it is you are. But with a single barrel, it's not necessarily a specific taste profile. I mean, they're going to still taste very similar, but a single barrel, if I get 2 or 3 different single barrels and line them up next to each other and taste them, you'll taste the difference between all 3 a lot of the times. And then Booker's actually gets batched. So this is batch 20-02, and which just means it was the second batch of 2020 that came out. And this particular one is called the Boston batch. And basically what that means is, so you got single barrel, and then when you batch whiskey, you're basically taking a certain amount of barrels and putting them together to come up with that particular bottle. So if you find another bottle that's that specific batch, 2020-02, then it should taste exactly like what I have here. If you go get batch 2020-03, then it's going to taste different than this one. It might still be on that same path, but it's going to taste a little different. If you get a whole nother bottle of this, the Baker 7 single barrel, it'll probably taste a little different at least. It'll still be Baker's, it'll still be on that same path, but it'll be a little different. So we're going to taste those two. A few more comments here. Any Japanese whiskey references? I've been told more than once. Hibiki, and I guess I'm saying that right, Hibiki, and Suntory. So those are the bigger names within Japanese whiskey. Suntory is actually part of the Beam Suntory family. And funny enough, so are these bottles. So these are both distilled by Jim Beam. And so they are all in that same family. So Japanese whiskey, there's plenty of people out there that are way more knowledgeable on it. There are a few, I guess few of the ones that I've had, but I don't know. There's a lot more other references out there that would give you better recommendations, but Nika from the Barrel is probably my favorite one so far that I've had. And I don't know, if it's because the proof on that is a little higher than some of the other Japanese whiskeys. Um, but that's kind of my go-to for Japanese. How do you feel about barrel clubs? I I love them. Um, I'm actually part of a barrel club, a couple of them, and so it's a really neat thing because it gives people the opportunity to go on a barrel pick. So you can actually go with a group of people to a distillery and pick out a certain barrel, and then so you'll taste. Let's say you taste 5 or 6 different barrels. Sometimes the experiences, they even make it to where you go to the warehouse and they'll cut right into the barrel itself, and the whiskey goes into the glass, and you try it like that. Um, which is really cool. But then there's also some that maybe just send you samples of different barrels and you pick. So there's a few different options, but at least with barrel clubs, it gives people that opportunity that may not have had that opportunity otherwise. And a barrel typically is going to yield a little bit over 200 bottles. So again, you're able to then get, as part of that club, you're able to get one of those bottles that aren't available to just anybody. So that makes that particular bottle a pretty special one. So I'm in favor of them. A few more comments before we get started on the whiskey. Is there any legal issues with using someone else's product and finishing it with something else? No, this actually happens. So sourcing whiskey is basically where you're getting your whiskey from somebody else, and then what you do with it then. So I mentioned Bardstown earlier. That's exactly what Bardstown is doing. They're getting their whiskey from different places, whether it's Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, wherever. And then let's say they worked with Prisoner Wine, is actually one of their ones they just did not too long ago. And Prisoner Wine gives them their empty barrels that they use for wine. They bring those barrels over that they bought from Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee. They blend them together, or however they choose to do it. And then they mix that in and put that in the barrel. And it's an empty barrel that they get from Prisoner Wine, but they put that in there. So that does happen pretty frequently. And it's good. I think a lot of the people in the whiskey community don't have a problem with blending or finishing. I think, to me, it seems to be just the transparency. So are you letting your buyers know that that's not your whiskey, that you originated, or it didn't originate with you didn't distill it? Where's it coming from? And then also let them know that you're finishing it, and by law you actually have to let them know that you're finishing it. But Bardstown does such a great job with transparency and letting their consumers know that exactly everything. So on a future stream, I'll bring a bottle, but they show percentages of where they're getting each, or I guess the percentage breakdown of what whiskey went into that bottle or that barrel. So I will start with the Baker's 7-year. Let's see. So the thing with this particular one is it's a Baker's 7-year. So that just means that whatever barrel they may choose to do the single barrel just has to at least be 7 years, but it can be older. So let's see if the camera picks this up. So let it focus. So 8 years and 6 months is actually how old this particular one is. So, so again, it just has to at least be 7 years for this particular product. But this one happens to be 8 years and 6 months. So pour that there for a second. And then Booker's. So like I said, both of these are actually distilled by Jim Beam. And that was one of the things that I thought was cool when I got into whiskey, is I didn't really know that Jim Beam had Booker's and Baker's and Basil Hayden and Old Granddad 114 and Old Granddad and Bottled and Bond and all these other ones. There's a lot of products that Jim Beam puts out. And Buffalo Trace is another distillery that's kind of like that. Their brands are separate. And so I didn't realize that they were all coming from the same place. And so I thought that was a really cool thing when I first got into whiskey, is to realize, I took a few tours and and realized that they had all these brands across Knob Creek. Yep, Knob Creek is a Jim Beam product. Um, and so it's really cool to see all these different things, because once I realized that, then when I go taste, like even for tonight, I'm sure I'm going to taste the similarity between the two, because it's the same mash bill. So meaning that the percentage of the grains in that whiskey are the exact same. It's just either proofed differently or aged differently, or aged in a different part of the warehouse, or um, whatever it may be. Um, so yeah, so we will start with the bakers. So Jim Beam, um, a lot of people, I don't know where it came from, but a lot of people actually call it the Jim Beam Funk, or the Beam Funk. But all that means is Jim Beam typically is known for, like, they'll have like a nuttiness, or like a peanut, or like, something along those lines. Some people have said peanut shells. Um, that that tasting note comes through a lot of times on Jim Beam products. So it's just become the Jim Beam Funk. So on this one, I can sense that, but I also, it's almost like a citrusy, like almost like an orange zest. So not like an orange peel or anything, just a very light citrus type of scent to it. So that's the Bakers. This is the Bookers. Hmm. That's it's definitely more. There's almost like, at least for me, there's some like darker notes in the Bookers. So like I think the oak pretty much, and it could be just because it's a higher proof. I'm not sure. That oak is, I pick that up more in the Bookers than I do the Bakers. So stats on them real quick. So Jim Beam, actually, like I said, they use the same mash bill, and a mash bill just is what that the grains that make up that whiskey. So for it to be a bourbon, it has to at least be 51% corn. So here, Jim Beam's using 77% corn, 13% rye, 10% malted barley. So for these two products, they both are made up of that exact combination. Um, so they're just aged differently, and the proof is different. And again, it could be also where it's coming from in their warehouses. So Baker's is 8 years, 6 months, as we saw on the label. And then on the Booker's, it actually has it down to the day. So 6 years, 3 months, 10 days. But it's also 126.5 proof, whereas this one is 107 proof. So one of the best ways that I've heard that explained when it comes to proof and flavor in whiskey is actually from Jimmy Russell from Wild Turkey. He actually talked about, like, in comparison to steak. So a lot of people like their steak more on the rare side because of the tenderness or the flavors that come out of that. If you do it well done, a lot of people feel like that flavor for a steak is not there as much as it could be. And so with whiskey, a lot of people feel the same way, just going with the proof. So a higher proof product typically will bring you more flavors. When it's proofed down or a lower proof, that all that really means is that water was added to it, and it's diluting that whiskey. So it allows them to make more bottles of it, but a lot of people feel like you're watering it down, basically. Another thing people like to do is, like, maybe they will buy 126 proof or 130 proof or whatever it may be, and then they choose how much to water it down, versus buying a product that's 80 proof and it's already watered down. We can't go back up from there. So the Baker's is 107 years old, or 107 years old. Yeah, that'd be an old whiskey. 107 proof, 8 years, 6 months, 77% corn, 13% rye, 10% malted barley, and the retail price is around $60. And then the Booker's is 126.5 proof, 6 years, 3 months, 10 days, 77% corn, 13% rye, 10% malted barley. And the retail price around that is about $90 when you're able to find it. Because lately, Booker's has actually been a lot harder to find. So now that these have sat in the glass for a few minutes, I'll try the Baker's. So it's actually a lot spicier than not. I mean, it is a little hotter than I thought, but more like I don't taste cinnamon, but it reminds me of cinnamon. Like when you, I guess there's a little cinnamon in there. When you eat something that has cinnamon on it, it's almost got like a spice to it, even though it's not spicy. If that makes sense. Um, so I think that's the main note I get there. Obviously, like I said before, the peanuts, that Jim Beam product. Um, but at 107 proof, I feel like that drink's a little hotter. I mean, I know it's 107 proof, but it drinks a little hotter, in my opinion, than some other 107 proofs that I've had. Let's look at a few more comments here. The largest craft distiller that is not big whiskey. I would actually say New Riff. So I mentioned them earlier. New Riff is still kind of in that category as craft, but I don't know that they should be considered craft anymore. I mean, they've grown so much. So I would say they're probably, in my opinion, that's the largest craft distiller. I don't know what the actual answer would be, but that would be my thought. When people get scotch, splash of water, are they lowering the proof? So technically, they are. Anytime you add water to anything, you're lowering, because all the proof is the percent of alcohol that's in that liquid that you have. So what percentage of this, whether it's 50% of this is alcohol uh, or not, then when you proof it down and you add water, now you're diluting that alcohol out. So it's a lower percentage of alcohol. So you're lowering that proof down. Um, and I'm not. I follow scotch and I drink some scotch, but there's a few people that I've watched that I trust on that, and they've actually mentioned that scotch is actually made to do that. So um, with scotch, they actually want you to drop in. Like drops, like an eyedropper or something, the water dropper, to do, one or two drops of water into the whiskey, and they feel like that opens up a lot of flavors. There have been some whiskeys that I do that with, and then it does open up more flavors where it's like, oh man, I didn't taste this before. There's others where I do that and it like flattens it to where I feel like there's no more flavor in there. Um, but it just depends on the whiskey and really how it's coming out. But the idea is that if I buy it at a higher proof, then I have the ability to lower it as much as I want. If I buy it at a lower proof, I can't go the other direction. So it's 50%. It ain't a bad thing, man. You drink your whiskey however you want to drink it. So you want to do 50% Sprite, you do 50% Sprite. The funny thing is, I know you, and I know that if it's 50% Sprite and 50% whiskey, if you're pouring it, then it's probably like 90% whiskey and like 10% Sprite. But that's not a bad thing either. So let's try the Booker's now and see how that taste compares. So to me, there's a lot more like brown sugar. And this is the Booker's, this is the Baker's. And the Booker's, there's a lot more brown sugar. The colors are actually really similar. Um, yeah, more brown sugar, peanut, cinnamon, spice, baking spices type of thing, but not too heavy on the bacon spice in the Booker's. Um, Caramel and vanilla. I mean, those two things, those are pretty much like what you get in a lot of whiskey, and I definitely picked that up in both of these. Um, for whatever reason, the Bakers, I get more of that citrus. It's like going in that direction. The Booker's is going in a direction of like brown sugar. Um, that Booker's don't count. Doesn't count for what? For Are you making a drink with Booker's? I don't understand. Uh, we get the whiskey emojis. Ty said he'll take a shot immediately. Ty never said that because Ty has a 1 year old and Ty also has a job. So in the morning. So we're not doing that. But um, if you ever are trying to figure out what you like, there's so many people out there that have reviews and I do some reviews as well of different whiskeys. At least when I got into it, there's so many people that will nose a glass and then they will tell you all these different things that they're smelling. There's no right or wrong answer to that. So if you pick up something, like one of the things I used to do is I would close my eyes and just smell it and basically train my brain to say, like, what are you smelling? And I would pick out the any of those notes from that. But if you're having a hard time, like if you drink something and you're just like, I don't know, it just tastes like whiskey. One of the things that I suggest is doing what I'm doing right now. It's called A/B testing. So you pour two and you're just kind of like going back and forth, because what'll happen is you'll be able to notice that, like, okay, this is sweeter than this one is. So it kind of at least like gives you a direction to go. And then from there you can say, like, okay, is this sweet like candy? Is it sweet like fruit? Is it sweet like honey? Or, there's different types of sweetness. So it kind of gets you going on a certain path. But when you go back and forth between two, um, and I don't just mean like to like chugging two, but if you're actually trying to taste whiskey and you're trying to understand what you're tasting, one of the things you could do is to go back and forth between two different bourbons or whiskeys in general and just see. So one of the things that I did originally was, like, I would go between, like, I'd have one glass of scotch and one of bourbon. And so from there, it's like, man, bourbon is a lot sweeter than scotch is. And so, okay, what type of sweet? It's like vanilla sweet, caramel sweet, or whatever it may be. So testing it along those lines definitely helps. So another thing that I do is I smell it, or it's also called nosing it, right? And then taste it. And then after I taste it, then I basically try to nose again. So I forgot what the actual percentage is. Somebody may know in the chat. But you can actually, after you taste something and then go back, like, it's all connected, right? So now when I go back and smell it, I may pick up different flavors and notes that I didn't pick up before, because I've tasted it now. So that's kind of opened that up. So let's taste again. Baker's. Does this mean palate cleanser is not needed when tasting? It just depends on what you're trying to do. So if I'm reviewing back to back, like if I'm going to review this Booker's and then go review the Baker's, I'll do some type of something to cleanse my palate, or even to kind of get my nose situated. So one of the tricks is to basically smell your own arm, because that's your scent. So that's what you're used to. So that brings your nose basically back to zero. Sometimes people smell coffee beans and other things like that. I don't like to do that because, I don't know. For me, it's like coffee is such a strong smell that if I go from that to another bourbon, maybe I pick that back up. But if I'm reviewing and I'm trying to really understand that particular whiskey, then I'll get some water and Typically, I don't do it like that. I don't do back to back. I'll do one, drink some water, wait a little bit, and then I also eat crackers just to kind of get my palate back, and then go into the second one. Or is this only one compare? Yep. And then Trash Crew FC on Twitch is trying to get me to take shots, but it's not happening. At what viewer count will you shave the beard? It's a burning question. And well, I don't know, man. I'm starting to get gray in this beard. I'm an old man now. I don't know. I had the baby and then gray. And he's only one. Imagine when he's 16. All right, so let's look at the Bookers again. Man, it's a lot closer than I thought it would be. So just to be honest, Booker's is like one of my favorite bourbons that's out there. But like I said earlier, lately it's become very hard to find. So when I do find a batch, I definitely grab it. This is the first time I've tasted the two together like this. So at least where I'm at, the Baker 7 year is pretty easy to find. When I first got into whiskey, I would say Baker 7 was actually they actually had a small batch is what it was then. Was the only offering. They didn't actually do a single barrel like this. But anyway, Baker's was my favorite. I actually didn't care for Booker's at all. And then the more that I got into whiskey, and I don't know if it's the higher proof, but Booker's then became one of my favorites. And then they actually have a series called Little Book that comes out every year. And Little Book 3 just kind of blew my mind. I thought that was one of the best. That was the best Little Book, in my opinion. It was the chapter 3. Last year was chapter 4. And obviously chapter 5 is coming out this year. So we'll see what chapter 5 is. Chapter 4, they incorporated rice into the whiskey. So like I mentioned earlier about the mash bill and the grains going into it. So they incorporated rice as part of that. And it's interesting. It's not, I didn't think it was bad. It's just very different from what I was anticipating. So with Little Book, what they do, there's all different types of combinations basically that they're doing, but they'll mix. So like I said, they have Booker's, Baker's, Knob Creek, Basil Hayden. All those brands are Jim Beam. So basically they'll take these different ones and put them together and just see what pops out. And so I'm sure there's a lot more strategy behind it than just mixing and see what happens. But that's what they're doing. They're experimenting with the different whiskeys they have. And Little Book 3 I thought was one of the best ones I had ever had. And then that's kind of what got me on the Booker's train all of a sudden. And then Baker's 7 single barrel came out. And then I tried that. Booker's also came out with a 13 year. I have the 13 year. I think the 13 year has a little bit more oak, and it should. It's been sitting in a barrel for a lot longer. But this is the first time I've done the 2. And that's tough. Coming into this, I would have said Booker's would have won. And I'm not saying that they lost yet, but the Bakers, with how much easier it is to find, and the fact that it's $30 cheaper, I don't know. I think it might be Baker 7, which kind of hurts me because, like I said, I'm definitely a huge Booker's fan. I think for me, I wouldn't really consider either of these a daily drinker, but because the Booker or the Baker's is easier to find, it's cheaper. That might be one that I maybe go to more often than I would the Booker's. Booker's, I know that this particular batch, I don't have another one like it. I may have another Booker's, but it's a different batch. It's going to taste a little different. So, and they're a lot harder to find. So I may not go for that bottle as much as I would for the Baker's. So for this comparison only, because if I review them separately, it could be different. But for this comparison, I definitely think it's got to go to the Booker 7. So if you see it and you're looking for something new, give it a shot. Like I said, it's 107 proof. So if you're not used to drinking whiskey that hot, um, feel free to add ice or water or 50% Sprite if you want. But I'm even kind of shocked myself. That's kind of it's to me it's amazing when you put two together, what one may bring out of another, versus just drinking on its own. But yeah, so that's exciting. Baker 7-year single barrel, and this particular one, like I said, is 8 years. I know a lot of their bottles are 8 years. I have seen some that are actually 7. But again, with it being a single barrel, I may think that this is better than Booker's in this scenario. But like if I try this another time, maybe it's a different barrel. Most likely will be a different barrel. And let's say it's a different batch from Booker's. Then basically that could be a whole different comparison. So that's why doing these are fun. But so I guess you guys wanted me it's not a shot, but I'll finish off the rest of the Bakers. Man, it's almost, and I don't know if that's because that was at the end, but there's definitely more vanilla at the end of the Bakers. So yeah, does anybody have any questions about either of those? Or I guess if there's a bottle in particular, I know some people were looking for some recommendations. So I think the recommendations are always hard, I think, because of where you're at in your whiskey journey. But if you are, because I almost look at it like tiers, maybe. If you're kind of like you've had Woodford Reserve or Elijah Craig or, some of these whiskeys that a lot of people turn to in the beginning of their journey, then I would suggest maybe trying the Baker 7-year single barrel. I know one of my followers on Instagram actually had the small batch recently and was kind of getting into that, but just exploring the Baker's line. But I think the single barrel is definitely worth looking into. So that's all I have for this week's episode of Bourbon Talk. Thank you guys for joining in and seeing which of these two stack up. And like I said, Baker 7-year for the win. We're going to be here next week, next Tuesday, 8:00 Eastern, same time, same day. And like I said, there's going to be going forward, either be testing different bourbons or having different discussion on that. But a lot of it will be true bourbon talk. So there's a few different guests that I've been working with to come onto the show. So I'm really excited for that. If you are not already subscribed to my Twitch page and YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe and follow button. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Ty the Bourbon Guy. Appreciate everybody following and watching tonight. Hope everybody is enjoying their whiskey and doing so safely. I appreciate you guys. Enjoy the rest of your night. Cheers.